Good afternoon. Welcome to Rubbin Minds here on Channels Television. My name is Chika Agu, and I'm sitting in for Ibuka Obi Uchendu. It's been a very difficult week for Nigerians across the country. And today we're going to try to make sense of all the things that made its way into the news. And here with me to do that is my very good friend, Fola Daniel. Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on surviving another week out here. All right, so Fola, let's do this. The federal government, we understand, is in talks with the World Bank for a 1.5 billion naira budget support loan. What do you think of this?
One of the things that the economists have told us repeatedly is that we're not supposed to borrow for consumption. We're supposed to borrow for production, for manufacturing, for infrastructure, and any other thing that has to do with what we call capital goods. In other words, you're getting the money to produce infrastructure, to create more businesses, to create opportunities, maybe to invest in ICT, artificial intelligence, manufacturing sector, infrastructure. If you're doing that, it's absolutely okay. But when you just borrow the money and throw it at people, most likely, people are going to be given that money. They're going to spend it anyhow. We're not going to see the impact on our national budget as a whole. So it's not such a good idea to keep borrowing so that we can support the budget. The budget itself, if you take a look at the entire budget over 10 trillion naira, you realize that more than 60% of that budget is actually what they call recurrent expenditure, meaning that the budget that we create on a yearly basis, we spend more than 60% of it, just servicing debt, paying salaries and stuff like that. So that in itself does not make any sense. Our budget should actually show that we're trying to build more of infrastructure. We're trying to create more projects, but we're already in a deficit. How did we get here in the first place? It's because we borrowed a lot of money. That's why we have a budget that shows that we're paying back a lot of loans, a lot of debt on a yearly basis. So if you're going to borrow more, we're going to be in a more difficult place in the coming years, because by the time we create the next budget, we then have to make room to service the loan we're about to take for the next budget. So we're going to be in a perpetual cycle of trying to pay back the money we keep getting.
So, and I hear you, it makes logical sense when you put it this way, but also consider the fact that we have an infrastructural deficit, and you can pick any sector of your choice, and the story is still the same, right? If it's not underdeveloped, we need to scale up to meet, certain requirements for us to meet global best practice in that sector. But at the same time, you're dealing with millions of really hungry people whom you actually want to create jobs for, right? So if I know that you're not sending anybody hungry, or you're not sending anybody to factory on an empty stomach, and so that presents us with the need to balance out the problem, right? We need to feed the people, we need to help them take care of basic needs, but at the same time, we need to actually build infrastructure to help us turn profits over time. How do we balance this?
The first thing that we're going to do, if we focus more on food than on infrastructure, we're going to come back to where we are, or we're going to be worse off.
But it's a very important need.
That's what I'm saying.
That's why I'm going to the market, but people are hungry.
Regardless of how hungry we are, if the government does not focus on building more, we're going to be worse off. You know why? In the process of building, people will get jobs that are sustainable. When you try to create more jobs, real jobs, instead of just giving handouts, that's when people have something that is actually sustainable over the years. But if you hand them money, the question is, can you sustain giving them that money all the time? So if after 3 months you can't sustain handing them that money, what are you going to do? They're going to be hungry. You haven't solved the problem. You only give them something to thirst. Now they want more of it. You can't handle it. So you're going to create additional problems for yourself. What we should do is, for example, take projects across the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria, create major infrastructure projects in each geopolitical zone, and you create jobs as you do that. We're never going to come to the end of infrastructural projects, even in advanced countries. You're constantly maintaining, you're building new things. Technology is evolving. You see the need to build more things. So it never ends. And so long as that doesn't end, people have their jobs sustained. So it's one thing that we must do. Look into the manufacturing sector, which is what we have to do, and it will take care of a lot of problems. We don't borrow to feed people. And aside the fact that we don't borrow to feed people, the pressure on the dollar-naira situation is going to go down, because we're creating more jobs. And as we're creating more jobs, people have what to eat, and we're not importing what we should be producing here in the country. So the only solution is for us to build and spend money on infrastructure rather than focusing on feeding people.
Okay. So if we are building infrastructure, if we're borrowing to build infrastructure, and on the surface, that sounds like a good idea. And, you know, you've gone in depth rather into how, you know, it makes a lot of sense for us to continue that way. But the people counting the money are saying that it is adding to our debt already. I think was somewhere around 87 trillion naira. And it jumps that high because of the recent devaluation to our currency. So if we're adding this new World Bank loan to our already existing debts, do you think that it's crushing us?
Two things. Let me quickly, should I say I should correct two things? First of all, we didn't have what they call devaluation. It was floating the naira, which is different from devaluation. Okay. And the other thing is, you said that if borrowing to fix infrastructure looks good on the surface, it's not that it looks good on the surface. It is what it is. It is good. I'll give you a quick example. Look at the Lagos rail system that they're doing right now. Of course, the government does not have the money to do all of that. The government has borrowed the money to fix it. But haven't done that. The government indirectly has created a lot of jobs. Some of those people that we're going to give stipends to are people who now sell something at the metro line or maybe at the stops that you have in between. Now, somebody who probably didn't have anyone to sell to now has someone to sell to. Someone who wouldn't take that route before now takes that route. So they have somebody to sell to. So when you create infrastructure, as you should, directly or indirectly, there are jobs to be created. Somebody manages the ticketing system. Somebody produces the cards. Somebody is actually manning the rail. Somebody is at the train station all the time. Now, the number of buses moving have been doubled. So it's an example of what happens when government focuses on creating infrastructure. Indirectly, you will create multiple jobs across levels. So it is what we must do. Look at what we're doing with China. If we get them to build more roads, it's Nigerians that are actually constructing the roads. Technically, because we also have a rule that you must have at least 60 to 70% of Nigerians in your employment.
That's the Local Content Act.
Exactly. So if you're focusing more on infrastructure rather than just handing money to people, typically most roads are going to be built over 4 years, sometimes 8 years or even more. So somebody has a guaranteed job for the next 8 years. If you're going to construct maybe Lagos to Ibadan Expressway like we saw it, the people had jobs for the entire stretch of that time when that road was on. So it's not a 3-month palliative measure. If you're going to construct a road for 8 years, whether in the east, in the south, in the north, it means that people have a longer and durable or guaranteed job. That's what it is for infrastructure, and that's why we should focus more on it. And we spend less trying to buy things.
Now, this would be in an ideal situation. If we do all of these things that you've said, you also highlighted what the major outputs will be. But in many ways, some would argue that the ideal is not always what you experience here in Nigeria. So just coming from past experience, are you in any way convinced that this monies, when it comes here into the country, would be put to use in this manner that you've just described?
In most cases, we can have 100% execution rate. If we can, if we want to, but it's a systemic thing. We know that there are still people in the system who are more focused on their pockets than on the general populace. So if people are still more focused on their pockets than in the interest of the people, we're still going to have a situation where what should be meant for a project, somebody would actually, try to corner a portion of it for himself. And that happens not just because the contractor wants it so. Sometimes it happens because of the crop of politicians that we have or civil servants that we have. A number of times we blamed politicians and not realizing that it doesn't even have anything to do with politicians. It's the civil servant. Somebody has seen that you've gotten a project of maybe 50 billion naira. And he thinks 50 billion? You become rich overnight. How much of this is mine? And refuses to give an approval to your project just because he wants something and says, until you give me something, that's something that can happen. But there are ways around it. That's why we sign direct partnerships with China to make sure that some of these projects are not really direct cash. You're not actually getting cash from them, or they're not giving you cash. They're coming in, bringing in all the equipment, bringing in all their money. All you have with them is an agreement on paper. So there's nobody sitting in any office saying that until a portion of this money gets into my pocket, you can't start this thing. So while the systemic issue is there, and we're not going to get there overnight, we won't say because of that we're going to stop it. It's like saying, oh, cars can get bad on the road, and because of that I'll never drive a car or I'll never buy a car. You're still going to keep buying a car, and when there are issues, you fix them. So yes, there are issues, but we're going to fix them.
Right. And just off the back of this conversation, it would be interesting to find out what you make of the 25,000 naira palliative for 15 million households that this current administration is hoping to embark on. It's going to happen for 3 months.
So I'm not going to go against it completely, because whether we like it or not, it's not everybody that can instantly come up with something that they can do for themselves. There are people who are extremely poor in this country, whether we like it or not. And for the fact that they are extremely poor, you would be surprised to see what 25,000 naira can do for some households in rural areas, not in the urban area, of course. So yes, it's something that we should welcome. However, I would wish that we're not borrowing to get that money for them. I would wish that we're doing cost cutting from the cost of governance to do that kind of a thing. For example, the money the cars senators or members of the House of Reps are trying to buy, we can cut that cost, take out of that money to give it to them. We can reduce the number of aids that ministers, presidents, senior government officials are entitled to, and take a part of that cost and use it to do that kind of a thing. Not that we're borrowing to do that kind of a thing. So it's not a bad idea if it's going directly to the extremely poor people. The question is, where is the money coming from?
Right.
If we're taking it from what we have to give to them, acceptable. But if you're borrowing to do that, unacceptable, regardless of how good it looks.
Right. Also this week, it was the 3rd year memorial of the Lekki toll gate shooting. And I don't know if you went through the toll gates on that day. We saw heavy police presence. And for many Nigerians, especially young Nigerians, the question is, where is justice? Having followed the conversation all these years, do you think that the government in handling the NSAS protest has, done a good job of, giving justice to those who deserve it?
So we can't send something to the government, go to sleep, wake up 3 years later and expect that the government has something waiting for us. The media went to sleep on the Lekki matter. The individuals who were agitating also went to sleep on it. And of course, the government relaxed. So it's a 3-point triangle. And only one angle is being held accountable, and that's the government. What about the media? What about the people? Did we follow up? Did we mount pressure? Did we ask them, we're still waiting to hear from you? How far have you gone? What is the situation? So we shouldn't just blame the government for what we should have held them accountable for 3 years later. We should have monitored or continually asked them, where are we on this? What has happened on this? Now, on the part of the government, which you're supposed to face, I'm not excusing the government. I think that the government also should be more responsible in giving us updates. This is what we are doing differently. This is how far we have come. This is what you're going to see. We haven't seen much of that, because it was after the Lekki toll gate that the lawyer was just shot. And thankfully, people are seeing justice with the case of the female lawyer that was shot, because the police officer who shot her has now been sentenced. So we understand that, like I said earlier, things may not happen overnight. We're getting there gradually. Right. And I think that judgment alone has served as a deterrent. So while it does not directly connect with the Lekki issue, it just may be a glimpse of hope that at least something is going to happen.
Well, let's see what happens next. Fala Daniel, thank you so very much. Stay with us. There are more conversations coming up next here on Rubbin Minds. We'll be right back. And just give me some reaction. Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. I am Chika Ago, sitting in for Ebuka Obi Uchendu. Now, in recent times, Nigerians have been up in arms about the decision of the House of Representatives to buy new cars for its lawmakers. And many Nigerians are wondering, well, why are we making all of this purchase now? Also, why are we not buying the Naira to save the Naira anymore? That's been a conversation on the lips of many Nigerians for some time now, as they experience the Naira lose some of its value in recent times. And so, to have this conversation about buying the Naira to save the Naira, joining me on set this afternoon is Toby Ajayi, who is the CEO of Nord Motors, which is a made-in-Nigerian vehicle. Mr. Ajayi, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon here on Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you with us. So, I want to talk about the demand for, Nigerian cars, not just as a sign of patriotism, but also in terms of the value for money that people are going to be spending on these cars. Where have we really come? Where have we gotten to right now in terms of the quality of made in Nigerian vehicles?
Okay, you asked. I think you asked about two questions in one. So I'll start from the quality. So the quality of made in Nigerian vehicles. I'll talk for my brand, Nod. Is as good as the vehicles from anywhere in the world. We even have a vehicle that has the 5-star Euro NCAP rating, which means is the safest vehicle, as safe as any vehicle, because the 5-star is the highest rating in the world. We decided to do this testing and bring these vehicles in and assemble them in Nigeria, so Nigerians can drive not just elegant vehicles. You can ask around. For those who know our vehicles, for example, they're really elegant and they're also very safe. So I think from a quality perspective, it's not a problem. We have a lot of customers and they can attest to the fact that the quality is really good. So I think what we need to solve is how Nigerians can understand and make it normal to drive a vehicle made in their own country. Because I think most people that have driven our own vehicles know that the quality is good enough. So I don't think that's a real big problem.
So you've answered the quality part of it, right? But what about the demand side of it? How has it grown or not over the past few years?
Okay, and just to talk about the demand, I'll also say something about the quality again. When you make cars, it's like when you make things, it's an aggregate of the components. So, and the skill of the people and the process, the production process. So we get our components from some of the biggest and best OEMs in the world. I don't want to mention brands here, but the same places, the same manufacturer of the chips, of the engines, of the transmission, of your most trusted brands in Japan are the same places we get our vehicle parts from. The same places. So you can understand the same quality because it's the same. Then our technicians here are also very skilled and the production process is also very, very good. So in terms of quality, it is clear. Now, let's go to the demand side. The demand side is not as good. That's one of the biggest problems because I also hear about people talking about our capacity. I think the entire auto industry has a capacity of, I can't remember, maybe 200,000 units a year or so.
In Nigeria, industry.
Yes.
And every homegrown car maker put together.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. And we have a demand for just 19,000, I think the last time. From a country, we Nigerians buy 500,000 vehicles a year. But
new vehicles or when you say 500,000, okay,
anything.
New, used,
yes,
everything put
actually,
together, 500,000.
Vehicles and motorcycles, actually, and tricycles, everything combined together. And I think brand new, not made in Nigeria, just the total brand new is just 19,000. I think for made in Nigeria, probably 3,000 to 4,000 units. You can see how small it is. So 3,000, 4,000 units for an industry that has a capacity of about 200,000. I'll talk about my factory. We have two factories, both in Lagos. One, an innovation center inside University of Lagos, another one in Ekpe. One shift. Normally, most factories do 2, even 3 shifts. Just one shift. In 2 factories, we can do about 10,000 units. One shift. But we really need to produce and sell more than 100 units a year, maybe 150 a year. So that's, just imagine, 150 a year to about 10,000, about 9,000 something units per year. You can see how that's like less than 2% of the capacity.
That's a huge gap.
Yes.
But there is also, in recent times, particularly, with what's happening with the Naira, we're seeing, the value of the Naira dip, against the dollar, which is a major global trading currency. How do you think that local car manufacturers can actually step in here and, try and turn some of the attention in the automobile industry their way? How do you think, the Nigerian car makers can begin to do that? Okay,
so I think for us, at least for my company and 1 or 2 other companies that I know of, I think we're doing our bit. Well, I hear some complaints from that, but for Nord, for example, we maybe because of my training, I started my career at Mercedes-Benz, so I'm always, I just know how to make good things, quality things, really good things. So for us, we've done our part by ensuring that the vehicles are very durable, they're elegant, they're safe. We have 14 after-sales locations all over the country. So everything is there. What we need now is for the market to respond. And you're very right. Just like anywhere in the world, in America, in China, the government has to initiate this interest in the vehicle. The government, a country is usually the business environment and industry's biggest supporter, biggest investor, and biggest customer in their early stages. You understand? Look at the America we are talking about today, Apple, Intel, a lot of these companies are actually the direct result of something bad happened in America in 1957, the Sputnik event, where the USSR embarrassed them. The government, the next year, 1958, signed what we call NASA today. You know, and from NASA, the United States government, through the military, through the space agency, was pumping money into R&D, into companies. Companies just 2 years old, 3 years old, young companies with founders who are 28 years old, 30 years old, were winning contracts, government contracts, worth billions of naira. I'm sorry, billions of US dollars. This is this revenue and demand allow them to grow.
Right.
And they've grown to now become what we've seen today. And without that, we probably would not have our personal computer, because we won't have the microprocessor.
So here's the thing, right? A lot of people, and you revealed that, you know, this data earlier, just the demand for cars, you know, the demand for used cars, the demand for new cars. And the reality staring down at us, you know, staring at us in the face is that the purchasing power of millions of Nigerians continues to experience a decline. So many people in a way can only afford used cars. Do you think that the Nigerian automobile industry can fill that demand for used cars? Because a lot of people cannot buy new cars, right? But maybe if a person drives a used made in Nigeria vehicle, sees the value in doing that, right, would be, and you know, they would feel a need, right, to buy a new one when they can afford it.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that question in two parts. The first part is this. Yes, I think one of our biggest goals as a company, and I think in the entire industry, is to stop people, discourage them from buying used vehicles. And because there's a big difference in terms of,
when you say buying used vehicles, like, of any kind,
because there's a big advantage in driving brand new cars. Just brand new, anything. I
mean, it would be nice.
Yeah,
right?
So I'm going there.
Nice.
So in terms of pricing, for Nord, for example, I think for your average Japanese vehicles, we are at par with a 5-year-old used vehicle of this, in the same class, in the same segment.
A lot of people are not buying 5-year-old used vehicles in Nigeria. It's still a luxury.
And that's why I'm going somewhere. That's the second part. Now it's like just imagine you have a restaurant. You are coming up and you sell chicken and chips, for example. You sell newly cooked chicken and chips. But because you're Nigerian, you are not. But then you want to sell at a price that is lower than that of a foreign chicken and chips company. I don't want to mention a brand, you know. Now somebody's trying to make you sell at a price that where a price for chips that are supposed to be thrown away. Imagine after the whole day when they want to throw the chips away because it's not fit for consumption anymore. You know, that they can throw it away for like maybe 100 naira or so. Then your own brand new chips and chicken that you've made, you've passed through all the supply chain, you know, people want you to sell at that now. It's not going to be possible for us to sell at the price of at maybe 20 years old or 15 years old vehicle. But I think 5 years old is because the brand new to brand new, we're both brand new. We offer the same warranty as brand new. You understand? You're actually buying a brand new vehicle. but you're going to be buying it at a price of a 5 years old vehicle. Now, the second question is Nigerians cannot buy 5 years. Yes, this is why we need to start doing some of the things right. We cannot have a country where most people cannot afford the basic things they need. So to answer this in shades of gray. You know, there's no white or black here. We have to build our economy to the point where there are jobs, good jobs, and people can earn well. And that's why buying in, because when you buy abroad, there's no real value in Nigeria. You exported the jobs. But when you buy from us, for example, you create a lot of jobs, which means that those people can buy things. They can buy homes. Because over time, because people like Ford and the rest built people that can make their cars, because the people will always buy the cars, and the middle class was expanding. And that's the same thing we need to do in the country. Try and buy Naira more. The more you buy things made in Nigeria, the more you create a middle class that will be able to buy vehicles that are decent and affordable.
Right. So you see, here's a very interesting offshoot from what you've just said. Right. First of all, I don't agree with the chicken and chips analogy. Just wanted to.
I would have broken it down, but I don't have time. I could have broken it down.
I understand.
You, but,
I understand. But here's the thing, right? Like at the end of the day, we want to spend monies on things that will, stand the test of time.
Yeah.
Right. And so when people buy used cars, they are going for durability, but they are also going for costs, right? And this is where I think.
But when you buy used, there's no way. Ask anybody that has driven a brand new car, regardless of the brand. There is no way a brand new vehicle will not be better than a used vehicle.
Oh, obviously.
There's no way.
No,
so
obviously.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're buying a brand new vehicle at the same price as a used vehicle, it's supposed to be a straightforward.
Ideally, right? So ideally, it should be. So, okay, you know what? Let's put this in perspective for people watching. Give me a price range for a saloon car, right? So, a young graduate is working for the past 3-4 years. Has saved enough, wants to get a car. What's the entry level, price range at your company? Okay,
before I answer that question, right? For an entry-level guy who wants to buy a used vehicle, how much do you think a used vehicle is now?
So the very popular, there's this very popular car that that we use for like ride-hailing services, right? I know that they're somewhere around 3.5 million to 4 million thereabouts, maybe about 2008, 2009. That's how old, that's how far back a lot of young people have to go back, to search for cars to buy, and they're used to. So what is the commensurate value?
So exactly. So now that same vehicle today is around maybe 5-6 million because of what's happening. You understand? And you just mentioned that's like 2006, 2007. That's the vehicle I'm talking about. So that's a vehicle that is about 17 years old, right? That's a 17 years old vehicle. So like I said earlier, it's you cannot compare it to a brand new vehicle. However, we have vehicles that can go for as low as 12 million naira.
But that's the thing, right? Nobody's saying nobody's saying that you can compare. But the truth is that's what you're up against.
Yeah, but that's because we are in a country where people cannot afford what they should ordinarily be able to afford. You should not even be talking about someone who has gone to school, gotten a decent job, maybe a lawyer, or maybe a top accountant, getting a good job in a good firm, and maybe after like people that just finished school cannot get this car you're talking about now, because people can immediately within first year buy a 5 million naira car. That's a 17 years old car. So they're talking about people that have worked for like 3 years. After working for like 3 years, being a decent human being, you should not be driving a 17 years old vehicle. So there's a lot of things we have to change, and you have to change it step by step. It's not going to happen one day.
Of course.
So we have to find a way to ensure that those who can afford it, the ones that can afford, those who can afford can afford the 5 years old vehicle, let them start buying the brand new ones.
Let's not talk about those who can actually afford it, right?
Yeah.
And I hate to say this, but look at the House of Reps, right? We know that they're going to buy a lot of cars for lawmakers. We don't know what type of car they're going to buy just yet. But if the House of Reps came to Nigerian automobile manufacturers and said, you already know the type of cars that they would typically, ride around.
Yeah.
This is what we want. Would Nigeria's automobile industry be able to meet that demand? And how long would it take them to meet that demand?
I think we will have even been faster than the people that they bought it from, I'm sure. I'm sure we'll have been faster. Because like I mentioned earlier, they bought 360 units, I think, right?
Well, we don't know that they're buying. We don't know that they bought 360 yet.
Maybe 360
yes,
or something.
They should be getting
or maybe
that.
less than 500.
Yes.
That's the point I'm making, is that less than 500 units. Nord, we have a capacity of over 9,000 units a year. So that's about, about close to 1,000 a month. So we can easily make those vehicles in 1 month if we get, the notification in advance. So,
will you pitch?
Sorry, will
you pitch to the House of Reps?
We did. Yes, we did. Sometime in June, July, but it didn't happen, as you can see. But we've spoken to some of them again, and I just really think that going forward, they would understand the importance of showing, optics is very important, of showing people that you also support your own country, you believe in your country, And like I mentioned earlier, for Nord, I'll speak for Nord, our vehicles are as good as any vehicle anywhere in the world. You can ask any of our customers. So I do not really see any reason why. Because like I said earlier, even when you want to buy a Nord vehicle, it's not just for patriotic reasons. The patriotism is just a plus.
So here's another thing that I want to talk about, because you mentioned it earlier. You talked about, assembling, and you were careful to use the word assembling. And that's the arguments, many other Nigerians are saying is, can we actually call this made in Nigeria if what you're essentially doing is assembling these cars here?
So I like to use the right terminology because I'm a professional. The only way you can make a car is by assembling it. Do you get? The act of making a car is called assembly. I've said it a couple of times. Just like the only way you can make cake is by baking it. However, you can manufacture the components yourself. For us, for example, we manufacture, depending on what you use to calculate it, either the monetary value, or the weight. We manufacture about 33% of the components of the vehicle here in Nigeria, here in our factory. So you can manufacture maybe the steel components like the body, manufacture maybe the engine, like we manufacture the grills, the bumper, Then you take it to the assembly line, and that's where it is assembled. Right. Like you want to cook your jollof rice, you get your rice, you can get your water yourself from your borehole. So you made your water, right? Then you get your rice, you get your salt, then you cook it. That's how it's made. So
but even then, that's almost, sorry to interrupt you, that's almost 70% of, what you need to assemble the car coming in from outside the country. And at a time where dollar continues to, see an increase against the naira, some people are going to argue that, well, we are essentially still buying.
No, that's not. So
we're paying the dollar through the back door.
No, that's not true, because number one, okay, let me just, so number one, I make about 100 vehicles a year. We make about 100 vehicles a year, and we have about 60 direct staff. 60 direct staff for just 100 vehicles a year. So imagine this company is beginning to make 10,000 vehicles a year. You can imagine the amount of jobs to be created.
Right.
If you just buy those vehicles, you don't have to, just maybe 2 or 3 salespeople, and that's all. But you need to have, when you manufacture, you need to keep the engineering team, technical team, R&D team, and the rest. So you create more jobs, and those jobs have multiplier effects on how impactful they are on the economy. So and when you going back to the percentage you're talking about, there is no country in the world. I work for Mercedes-Benz. I've been to most of the factories of Mercedes-Benz in Germany. No country, no manufacturer makes every component themselves.
Right.
So you have to get some things from different places.
So since you're already doing all of this, right? You're bringing in a lot of components into the country. We're seeing, what's happening with our currency. How is that affecting, you as just another
it's
Nigerian
really bad.
business?
Like that's why. So one of the biggest components that we bring in, that I think if we take out, maybe we will get, now I'm doing about 33%. We take that out, it will go to about maybe, because I think that component is responsible for more than 50%, maybe 55%, which is still the body. And I've said it because I'm not happy that we have to import the body. It's this old technology. We should be able to have our own steel lines in Nigeria, have our pressing machine where we press the steel, and we have our own body. But now we have to go and buy our body from somewhere else because we don't have steel. That's nothing. There's something I can do about that. There's nothing anybody can do about that. You don't have the steel in country, you don't have the steel in the country, you have to import it. So steel is about 50% of what we need to make the vehicle. And I've told people, if we start making our steel in Nigeria, we'll reduce the cost of our vehicles by more than 30% because it'll be a lot affordable in the country, and you don't have to pay freight because steel is heavy. The cost of shipping it from one point of the world to another is expensive, is significant. So, but when we make it in Nigeria, I don't have to put it in a container. From wherever it is, we can bring it to where we are, and I'm sure that will really, like I said, bring the cost of the vehicles down. So it is normal practice to get components. It's a supply chain from different parts of the world and aggregate it in your assembly plant.
Well, thanks for clearing that up. And good luck with everything else.
Yeah.
Toby Ajayi is the CEO of Nord Motors. Stay with us. This is Rubbin Mind. Do you have old flip-flops at home? Discarded, not in use anymore? Pull them out, because my next guest has something interesting to do with them. He is Komboye Eugene, and he's an environmentalist and an artist. Welcome to Rubbin Minds, Komboye. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
And great to have you here. So I've seen your work, and it's very interesting. It's really fascinating. So you take discarded flip-flops and you turn them into portraits.
Yeah.
So why do you like picking rubbish on the floor?
Well, it's actually started about 7 years ago. As a student of Ouch Polytechnic. I studied art from Ouch Polytechnic. I graduated in 2018. So during my time there was a kind of scarcity of material, conventional art material, If we need material, we have to send someone either to Lagos or to Abuja to get materials. Now, these materials are not only scarce, but they are also expensive. So maybe sometimes towards the middle of the semester, there's no money. So certainly I have to do my assignment. So that is actually how I started. So I started sourcing for post-consumer materials. But then something actually, I don't know, I just picked interest in this kind of footwear. So that's how I started. I started working with this material and up to this point. Yeah.
That's interesting. And since you started doing this, your art has scaled. There seems to be an appreciation for you, using the material that you use for your work. When you started out, even though it was out of a place of scarcity and you needed to fill a pressing need, at what point did it hit you that what you're also doing is saving the environment?
All right. For me, I've always wanted to do something that's a little bit different from what everybody is doing. In 2016, I was in Universal Studio of Art, where I did my one-year industrial training. I trained under Mr. Abiodun Olaku and Mr. Wallace Ejo. So they taught me the foundation of art. That I did that outside school. So when I went back to school again, I was greatly influenced by Mr. Kent Ona and Mr. Lawani Sunday. And when I came to Lagos, one thing I did actually was, during times when I visited galleries, I tried to look out for something that is not there. So I look around, and this is something a little bit not many people are doing, because when you talk about art, what comes to mind in many people, majority of time, is the conventional material. When you say I'm an artist, people will think, oh, you paint with color or you sculpt. And so then I feel like there's need for me to do something a little bit different. So that was how I started. And over time, when I started making mosaics. I cut these materials into tiny cubes and arranged them. But with time, my collection started growing. And I sit back and I had to kind of look deep inward and say to myself that if I keep on walking in this direction, I will fill up a space, and or to maybe I will not have more space to put this material, and I really want to do something. So that was how I started kind of not cutting this time, but assembling the materials, not without kind of destroying their original form. So
Right.
that is actually how my journey to this point had been.
Right. But, what I was really hoping that you would speak on is, the fact that what you're doing in many ways is recycling.
Yeah.
Right? You're taking people's discarded materials and turning them into something new that would now go into people's living spaces,
Yeah.
where you would typically not find those sort of things. How do you think art is helping you in your own little way save the world?
Okay. Plastic pollution is everywhere. It's a global problem. Every part of the world is fighting it, and so there's actually a need to do something. And I most times I sit down and look at myself and I say to myself, it's a privilege to actually contribute to the environment, or the environment that I live, because if we do not take care of this environment, it will actually get back at us in many ways. So it feels good that I am able to actually contribute to a kind of to the environment in many ways possible. And one other thing again is people are watching out for opportunities. There's kind of a certain level of difficulties around, so people will actually need to check out for something that will help them kind of pull themselves out. So that is where I fall into, because another thing is, for me, is if I should queue up along the line if I should queue with the people that use conventional materials, maybe certainly I wouldn't have had this kind of this level of growth that I've achieved over time. So it's a great privilege for me to do something that is both beautiful and also important to the environment.
Right, and that's it's a very beautiful space to be in, right? Because you can really see the impact your work is having on the environment. If there's a lesson here in what you do for other artists, right, who maybe are currently in that space where you were a couple of years ago when you were still a student at Auchi Polytechnic, what would be that advice that you have for them?
The advice I'll have for young artists majorly is there's this thing with a majority of artists. Everybody wants to do what sells. So just few people actually being original. If everybody wants to, okay, this is what is trending, so I should just follow up. So, and I think that alone have a kind of deter a lot of people from going deep into their real potentials for in terms of what they can do in terms of creativity. So it actually stopped people it stuck a lot of people, because everybody wants to, oh, this is what is selling, so let me do this. You understand? So my advice for young artists is most times they should look deep into their strength and work on those things that they feel is something that they are good at. So, and that is one thing that will kind of give them a voice and a space of their own.
Right. And as somebody who has done exactly what you're now advising young people to do, are you helping people find their feet in the arts world? You mentioned spending some time, with these legendary artists who now inspire your work. Are you doing the same for others?
Yes, I train people. I train young artists. I train people that want to study art, and I also train people on CS and industrial training. But one thing I do most times is, the moment I get people, I actually tell them, I'm not teaching you to be like me. because I don't want a situation where you produce something and I am reflecting in what you're doing. That is not originality. You understand? So a lot of times what I do is they work with me. So certainly they see what I'm doing, but I actually advise them not to do what I'm doing because I want them to be original. So what I do is I take them through the foundation, like how I started, through drawing, through painting. So I do paint now, but majorly it's because of the people that I'm teaching. So I just want to take them through painting other than doing what I'm doing. Because when they do what I'm doing exactly is when you see a work of art and my work and I tell them when you create a work and your work reminds someone of me, then you are not. For me, I don't know everybody there. Everybody's entitled to his opinion. For me, I feel if your work reminds people of me, then you're not doing something
Right.
really good. You
Okay.
understand? So outside that, also, though, I also advise them to actually check out for something
Right.
else. Yeah.
Well, sounds like you're onto amazing things, and I wish you all the very best, Komboye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Komboye Eugene is an artist who uses old flip-flops to make really beautiful portraits, and we're happy to have him here. And that's Rubbin Minds. Thank you very much for watching this evening, and we'll be back next week Sunday. My name is Chika Ago.
And just give me some reaction. Just